Oh, we don't hear any either. So before May starts, if you're going to have a speaking role tonight with slides, I made you a co-host, but please keep yourself muted until it's your turn to talk.
Not hearing May.
Did that help? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. So, welcome to the Tucson Amateur Astronomy Association May meeting. This is our first Friday of the month meeting, and you can find us here on Facebook or Zoom the first Friday of every month, usually, unless something very different has happened and we need to reschedule for some reason, which I think one time this year we're needing to do. We have tonight with us Jen Knoll and Terry Lappin, who are going to be helping us with our technology. And we also are going to have, people on Facebook with us during the evening, and we will have a question period so that, people can raise questions. You can enter comments or questions into the chat if you wish. If you're either on Facebook or on Zoom, that will work for you. And then we'll make sure and cover all of those. So we want to start first tonight. Well, let me first mention that we do appreciate on Zoom that people sort of pay attention to anything that they may be doing that's distracting visually for people. And if you're going to be getting up and moving around a lot, or maybe, doing things that's best not for everyone to see, that you remember to turn off the visual part of your Zoom, and you can continue to listen. We're going to start first with the voting information that's going to be presented by Pete Hermes. He has a reminder for us, for members.
Good evening, May. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to remind you, and I'm probably speaking to the choir because I would imagine most of the folks here probably have done so, but we did start voting for our leadership positions last Friday. The vote will be ending in about roughly 27 minutes at the top of the hour at 7 p.m., and then the results will be tabulated. So for those of you who have not voted, please do so. You have another 26 minutes to do so. And more than likely, you've probably received at least 3 emails this week asking you to do so. So just a reminder, and I'll be back to you a little bit later in the meeting just to report the results. Thank you, May.
Great. Thank you. The next person on our agenda is Michael Bakich, and I don't know if Jim Knoll needs to say anything before Michael starts or not. No?
Michael,
Yes.
you can go ahead and share, Michael.
Okay, that's better. Thank you very much. Let me share my screen here. Right there. Okay. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the Great American Solar Eclipse, something I've been talking about for a number of years. This time, it's the roundup. So for the past 12 years, I've been a member of the AAS Eclipse Task Force, and we've done a lot of things to promote the 2017 total eclipse, the 2023 annular eclipse, and the 2024 total eclipse. We've distributed tens of millions of eclipse glasses, mainly through schools and libraries. We gave out more than 100 grants to groups doing educational activities related to the eclipse. And we've worked with city, state, and national organizations to promote safety during this eclipse. Personally, I've done almost 200 talks related to these eclipses, not just the 2024 one, but starting with the 2017 one. Okay, did anybody notice? Really, did anybody notice? I think, as you'll see with these front pages of newspapers, many of them didn't even have a total eclipse, that, yes, people noticed. People across North America noticed. I got these, and I only grabbed, a couple of handfuls of them from a friend who downloaded almost 300 of them. So yeah, front pages everywhere, and some of the captions and titles are just wonderful.
Hey, Michael,
So-
can I interrupt for just a second?
Yeah.
Your audio sounds like it's maybe cranked up too high. Can you try bringing the level down a little bit? It's not quite as crisp as it usually is.
How about if I talk less loud?
That's good. That's fine.
Eclipses get me really excited.
Okay.
So we'll end on the Arizona Daily Star. Okay, so a couple of things. I personally received emails or phone calls from lots of places, lots of friends. So these were places that had success seeing the eclipse. Holly and I were with a large group in Kerrville, Texas, but a lot of places saw the eclipse. And I only know of 4 that didn't. A couple of friends in Texas, one in Del Rio, another at the Colorado Bend State Park. Unfortunately, the entire city of Buffalo was clouded out, and it's too bad, Niagara Falls. Niagara Falls was expecting a huge influx of people, but because of the weather forecast too, and a day before the eclipse, they did not have that. It would have been wonderful to see images of the totally eclipsed sun over the falls. Unfortunately, that did not happen. This is me giving a talk, one of those 200 talks in Kerrville, Texas. They had a wonderful setup, great, very bright projector with a large screen, fabulous sound system, and I spoke to a little over 20,000 people. So this was in Louise Hayes State Park in Kerrville. It was a wonderful time. This is First Contact, and you can see it just up there. A friend of mine always gives me a hard time because I really like First Contact. Well, this is the earliest photograph of First Contact that I've ever seen. And then just a couple more images of the eclipse, the diamond ring, Bailey's beads. This was the prediction of totality before April 8th. And this is the closest image that I've seen to that prediction. Lots of very cool stuff going on. A couple sequences here. This one really nice. This one's spectacular. Some facts. Gas sales were only up 7% throughout the path of totality. Maine, 26%. Dining, up 27%. Maine, 103%. Maine was, for months and months, predicted to be totally cloudy, a washout, nobody go there. And then several days before the eclipse, weather forecasters were saying it's going to be perfectly clear, come to Maine, and a lot of people did. Hotel room sales saw an overall jump of 71%, with New Hampshire going crazy there at 729. The average nightly prices for hotel rooms along the path were up 40%, which was actually quite reasonable. In 2017, there was a lot more room price gouging along the path of totality. Not so much in 2024. You may have seen this map. This was the week before the eclipse. These were bookings at B&Bs throughout America. I see kind of a pattern there. I don't know if you see it or not, but wow, something. Okay, so this poll was taken in Cleveland just after the eclipse by members of the astronomy club there and also one of the museums or planetariums, I don't remember which one. But 13.5% said that this event was an epiphany for them. It was life-changing. 45.5%, almost half the people, said it was wildly emotional. And I would certainly go along with that. Very cool, 36.4%. And then, the hard to believe one, 4.5% said no big deal. Did they survey people that were in a cemetery? Anyway, 4.5% of the people said, no big deal. This is every eclipse map ever, okay, done by a friend of mine. And I'm going to go through these fairly quickly, but I know this is being recorded, so read this at your leisure. It's pretty funny. And finally, my last slide, which is actually a short movie. I have a friend who was for a long time a TV meteorologist, and he went to New England, and his daughter set up a time-lapse camera. You know, we talk about total solar eclipses. It's an exact lineup of the sun, the moon, and Earth in that order, and the moon's shadow falls on us in the path of totality on Earth. What does that look like? Well, if you have light clouds overhead, it looks like this. You can see in the distance, getting a little darker, getting it, oh my goodness. And if you're under that, it was really spectacular. In Kerrville, it was something. And then, just like that, it was over. You know, almost 4.5 minutes of totality, and it really did seem to go that fast. Okay, that's the end of my presentation. I'll be back to talk about future eclipses at the end. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Michael. All right, I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. So this is what we're going to do tonight. So these are the presenters that I've got lined up and the order we'll do it in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually stop the share in between each presentation, and I want to make sure that the speaker can unmute okay, which you should all be co-hosts. You should be able to unmute, but please stay muted until your turn. And then I'll share the screen. I'm sharing almost all of these myself, so it will take me, 10, 15 seconds to switch back and forth. All right. So we'll start with mine. Mine's a little bit different in that I did not actually take a picture of the eclipse, but I put my drone up at 400 feet and took a picture of the crowd. And as you'll see, as this plays, you'll see, and it's compressed down to about 2 minutes, so I won't make you watch all 9 minutes worth of stuff. 50 minutes before totality, we had quite a bit of clouds around, so it was we weren't real sure if we were going to get it, but lo and behold, 10 minutes before, it just opened right up, and we had perfectly clear skies for totality. So this is what it looked like going into it. This is sped up right now. You can see the kind of the clouds rolling through and the people walking down below and moving around. I'll slow it down when we get to the start of the eclipse, and then I will speed it up again during totality and then slow it down at the other end. And now we're back to real time. And here she comes. I was kind of hoping to maybe be able to catch the bands, but you can't really do that. It just kind of dims all at once, but it is still kind of a cool effect. And now we are in totality, so it's sped up again. You can see the white top of our RV, the houses, and then occasionally reflection probably, or maybe a flash from somebody on the ground. Now back to real time. We're done. And I just took one more shot as I was bringing the drone back down a little closer in view. Okay, stop the share here for a second. And go back to- So Tom, you're up next. If you want to unmute, make sure we can hear you. Tom, were you able to unmute? Not hearing you, Tom. Show here and take a look and see what's going on here. Where are you, Tom? Yeah, I don't see him. Maybe he dropped off. Looking in time. Nope, I don't see Tom, so he must have had to drop off. All right, so I will just show you his slides. So he's got some pictures he took. I don't know what equipment he used, but we'll just kind of step through them here a little bit. Obviously, this I think is before any partial started. And there's a shot of the partial. A little bit more. A lot more. Totality. A good view of the drone around it. Another shot. Another one. This is their site. All right. So that was Tom Sarko's images. Terry, you're up next.
Okay, everybody can hear me, I hope.
Yep, we can hear you.
So as Jim's getting this ready, Gary and I decided to join the Astronomy Magazine tour group that was run through FLO Tours and Eclipse Traveler. And they took us close to Kerrville, but it wasn't Kerrville. It was a town called, for the eclipse at least, we were in, whoops, that's not the first slide. for the eclipse, we were in a town called Ingram, but because it was a tour group, 8 days long, we started out in Houston and then we went to San Antonio. So I've got some tour group pictures. So I'd never been to Houston Space Center, so it's really cool to see the Saturn V rocket there all laid out. That was really, it's something I always wanted to see. You can go to the next now. We also saw it's the Independence shuttle. It was used as a trainer, so it never went up in orbit. But that center photo is the cockpit, basically, of the shuttle. I thought it'd be bigger, but there's a lot of stuff there. But anyway, and you can go up this building on the picture on the right. You can go up the building and then go into the space shuttle or into the 747. It's mounted on the 747 there. Next slide. And we had a day on our own where they encouraged us to go shopping at the shopping center that we were staying at. The hotel's a part of a shopping center. We chose to go to the Museum of Natural Science, and I'd never really seen dinosaur bones like this in a museum. So I had to take pictures, and so that was fun. Next picture. We then moved on to San Antonio, where we spent 5 days. I would have liked to have spent a lot more time looking at the missions, doing the photography. That's my main interest, is photographing the old buildings and old churches, missions and such. So next slide. San Antonio, for those who've been there, you know what the river walk is, but it's in that center photo, you see the river. It's not natural at all. The sidewalk lines the entire thing, but there's shops, museums, restaurants, all kinds of fun things, and it's a very safe place. You can walk all night long. We were out there pretty late, and you feel very safe. So it allowed us to do some photography. So that upper left photo is probably my most successful photo at taking water that looks like cotton streams. So I was really happy with that photo. And of course, the picture on the right is a statue named, it's called the Stargazer. So of course I had to take a picture of that one. In that center photo, you can see one of the boats that they have boat cruises down the river. Next slide. And we missed the Picacho Peak flowers, so we took a side trip and saw some of the beautiful flowers that were blooming in Texas at the time we were there. Next slide. So here comes the eclipse. Now, I don't know if I didn't point out the very first photo on the slide thing, but it had lots of clouds. So we were not as lucky as some others, but we did have with us Allison Klessman from Astronomy Magazine. So I have a video. The video is a little bit choppy, but you might hear her in the background calling out what's going on. We were in a church parking lot, and we thought with the clouds, we thought they would move us to where it might be clear, but no, they did not choose to do that. So we were pretty clouded out. But let's go ahead and run the video, Jim. And I apologize, this video is a little bit choppy. I mean, very choppy.
Let me know if you don't hear the audio, because I don't remember. I should have stayed checked, but if you don't hear it, let me know.
Okay. And there's a voiceover, so I'm not going to say anything here. So we are in a town in Texas called Ingram. It's on the line of totality. There's Gary. We got our stuff all set up. We're with the tour group. We're all set up. There's clouds. Lots of clouds. I'm just waiting for the sun to come through a clear spot right at the right time. And it's not a good sign when you can see the sun without without the solar glasses. Means the clouds are pretty thick, but there are some clear spots. There's a clear spot right there. See? Right, I think that's this clear spot right there. If it would just be there at the right time. Yeah, so it's starting to noticeably get dark. The thin crescents left. Gary says it's getting dark because there's the honking huge cloud up there. There's no hope for seeing the sun at this point. So I'm just going to hang out here and watch for the shadow, but it is really getting dark very fast. And the camera's going to adapt, unfortunately, but it is getting really dark really fast. This is really cool, actually. Would certainly like to see the corona. Totality is right now. You can see people's cell phone lights. We are in totality. There is not a single sunlight or moon shadow up there, but it is really dark. This is really freaky, and it's getting even darker. Now you can noticeably on the camera see it's getting really dark. Well, you can see it. Just barely. It popped out between the clouds, not enough to see anything. But it is really dark. This is really cool. Middle of the day. Okay, here we go. Look how dark it is out there, though. It is really dark. I mean, surprisingly, the parking lot lights did not turn on, so that's good, but it is so dark in the middle of the day, and I imagine if this happened to ancient peoples, yeah, it would affect them to suddenly get dark in the middle of the day like this for a few minutes. And then we're gonna see, this is Max. Oh, there it is. Whoa! All right, we're seeing it. Ah, there it is. And where is it? Well, we saw a little bit, not much. Not enough to see the full corona. Oh, more, Gary, more. I'm gonna get my binoculars. All right, so after that, we got about 15-20 seconds of looking at the solar eclipse, and I did see with the binoculars a couple of prominences. Gary saw three, I only saw two. So you know, I wouldn't say it was hugely successful. I felt kind of bad for those who hadn't seen the 2017 eclipse, because that, you know, what we saw was not, I wouldn't say we saw a very successful image or view of the entire sun. But you know, we got to see something, and what there's a couple of things that I learned. One is that you probably, if you're going to do an eclipse trip, make sure you're going to see something else, just in case the eclipse just totally fails. At least if you're going to spend the money to travel, enjoy your time doing something else. Don't limit to just to those few minutes. And the other thing is, I don't think I'll ever do a tour group again unless I'm traveling in a place where it's either unsafe to travel on your own or I have a language barrier, because I really didn't like the tour group where you're pulled here and there and you can't spend time where you really want to. So that's my advice for future eclipse chasers, and I'll turn it over to Jim again. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Terry. It's always amazing to hear the crowd reactions, and you're gonna see that in a lot of these. Even on a totally overcast sky, they get excited, and that's really awesome. All right, Doug, you're up next. If you want to unmute, make sure you can talk.
Okay. Can everybody hear me all right?
We can, yep. All right, you got it.
So a couple of opening remarks before I get into this. I was at sea. My wife and I booked a cruise 2.5 years ago that we knew was going to be in Mazatlan, Mexico, which is right near the center line of the Eclipse path. We booked the cruise about 2.5 years ago because we knew we were going to be in Mazatlan on April 8th on the ship. So we were at sea, but they changed the itinerary about 2 months after we booked the cruise and decided not to be in port, and instead they were going to be out at sea somewhere. They said that would give us a better chance of being under good skies, which they were absolutely correct, because as it turned out, there was a thin layer of clouds over Mazatlan on the day of the eclipse, so it was a good thing we were out at sea. So we were located approximately 135 miles southwest of Mazatlan, right dead center on the center line of the eclipse. The captain had done his research well. He had 2 professional astronomers on the ship. He was talking to meteorologists and experts all the time during the cruise. He was obviously talking to other cruise ship captains because we were not alone. There were 3 other large cruise ships within 2 miles of our location. So we all kind of congregated at the same spot. And we had ideal, perfect weather. I made no attempt to take any images of the eclipse. They have professional photographers on the ship, a large number of them, and I said, let them do the work and I'll purchase the photos later. So all of these images were taken by the ship photographers. So I got to watch the whole thing without being distracted by camera. So this is the diamond ring at the start of totality. So next shot. That's totality with the corona. Next image. And this I thought was a really cool image because one of the things we noticed right away when we were looking at it is we saw those 2 really bright prominences, which beautiful magenta pink color on the right side of the sun. And that's what this image is. You can see those 2 prominences very easily in this picture. And then the next shot, that's the diamond ring on the back end of the eclipse. And then I think I've got one more. Yep. And then this is the whole sequence. They did this whole sequence for us, and that turned out really well. Now, one of the things that I thought the captain did, which was very nice, very considerate, he allowed the entire crew of the ship to watch the eclipse. They shut down everything. They shut down all the bars, the lounges, all the guest services. Everything on the ship was shut down so that the crew could go out and watch. There were only 2 guys in the engine room. They shut down the engines. All they had running were the station keeping thrusters to keep the ship in position, and that the entire crew was out there watching also, which I thought was really good. And that's all I got.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's nice when they can do something like that and give the crew a chance to see it
Yeah,
as well.
because I got to figure they're never going to see another one.
Right. And that's a perfect opportunity for them. And it's kind of interesting that you guys weren't alone out there.
No, it was crowded. There were the 3 large cruise ships and probably a half a dozen smaller ships.
How big was your ship? How many people?
3,500 passengers
Okay.
and about 1,200 crew.
I assume most of them knew that they were going to be centered on the eclipse, or was it a surprise to some of them?
You know what? Everybody on the ship that I talked to was there for the eclipse.
Okay.
They were all astronomers from all over the world. We had people from Australia, Japan, New Zealand, all over the world on the ship. A total of 64 different nations. The captain mentioned that were on the ship. There was one man who was in the casino playing the slot machines during the eclipse. They actually had to chase him out because the people who worked the casino wanted to go watch the eclipse.
Always one. All right. Well, thanks, Doug. That was awesome. Mike Wiesner, you're up next.
Okie dokie. Thank you, Jim. I'm going to share my screen if that's going to work.
Well, I can share it from here if you want.
Let me try it from my side. So just see if it'll
Should be
come
able
up. And okay, does everybody see that?
Yep.
All righty. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a hometown total solar eclipse experience. So just on my title slide here, that was a sequence. You can obviously tell it was clear where I was. So I knew I wanted to go to Southern Indiana because that's where my hometown is. But also right near my hometown was my alma mater. So did I want to go to my hometown or did I want to go over to the college where I got my degree? Seymour, my hometown's where I fell in love with astronomy back at the age of 6, back in 1954. And I saw my first partial solar eclipse there in July of 1963. So that's my little Edmund 3-inch telescope projection, getting the maximum eclipse there in 63. So that was kind of cool. So yeah, going to Seymour would be kind of cool. Indiana University Department of Astronomy was, of course, doing a big event, and that's where I got my astrophysics degree in 1970. So where do I go? Where do I go? Well, Seymour said, hey, Mike, we would like you to be a speaker at our eclipse celebration. So decisions made, I'm going to my hometown. A little bit later, they announced, oh, by the way, they had selected me to be the keynote speaker for their eclipse celebration. Well, then the Seymour Historical Museum said, oh, by the way, we want to put you on display in the museum on the Saturday before the eclipse. And would you be willing to do that? You can sign your autobiography there. So, yep, okay, I'm going to go to the museum. So there was a downside, however, in not going over to Indiana University. So after I decided to go to Seymour, IU announced who their guest speaker was going to be. And since I would not be at IU, he would not get the opportunity to meet me. It was William Shatner was their guest speaker. So sorry, Bill, you didn't get to meet me. So on Friday, there was a special unveiling. There was a company who actually, it's called Coloring My Town. They create coloring books for communities all over the United States. They've done this. And they donate these coloring books to schools and to local businesses. The schools give them to kids, and I can't see that too well. And then the businesses can sell them to make a little bit of money. So they did a special one, and one of the pages was me in their coloring book. So that was kind of cool. So here I am on Saturday out in front of the Historical Museum. And one of the neat things they did was they put up a display board here on the right-hand side. They have a whole bunch of stuff about me. But over on the left side is Dr. Frank K. Ebenson. Dr. Ebenson was from Seymour. He was chairman of the IU Astronomy Department for decades, and like 3 decades, I think it was, including while I was there as an undergraduate student. He was heavily involved in the site selection and then ultimately getting Kitt Peak going out west of Tucson. So it was really cool to be paired up with him there at the museum. So here I am selling my autobiography. Sunday, they had their Eclipse Festival, and here I am beginning my keynote talk. Monday morning, Total Solar Eclipse Day. This is what it looked like from the hotel where I and my wife were. On Friday when we arrived at the hotel, I decided to just stake out a location at the hotel because the forecast was a little bit iffy. And, did we want to go out to the airport where the big crowds were going to be and dealing with traffic getting to and from the airport? So I just decided I would stay at the hotel on Eclipse Day. So this is the parking lot where I was going to set up, and that was what the sky looked like the morning of the eclipse. So for Seymour, Seymour is right here on the path of totality. Here was Bloomington, Indiana University. They were pretty much right on the center line, but we still had 3 minutes and 5 seconds of totality there in Seymour. So that was a nice, respectable duration. Where I was for the 2017 eclipse, we had a little over 2 minutes, so we got a little bit longer totality there in Seymour, which was cool. And the sun was about 60 degrees high in the sky for most of the eclipse, so it was well above any obstructions, trees, buildings, things like that. So here was my setup. The back of the SUV had lots of stuff that I could quickly grab. I had my digital SLR, full frame digital SLR with a 600 millimeter telephoto lens and a solar filter on that. And it was all on a tracking mount. So I was all ready to go. Before I get into those photographs, I just want to show you something really kind of cool. There was this app for both Androids and iPhones called Solar Snap that had just been released earlier this year. And so I used that with my iPhone 15 Pro Max. So here's a partial phase, and totality captured by that Solar Snap app. So pretty kind of cool what this app could do automatically. My niece Linda, visiting from New Jersey, she took this iPhone 13 mini camera app photograph, and you can see Jupiter up there on the upper left-hand corner and Venus down to the lower right of the sun, and nice corona, and the moon right there in the middle, blocking it out. So that was pretty cool. So this was diamond ring at the beginning of totality with that DSLR 600 millimeter lens. Got that nice prominence down there at the bottom. Mid totality, roughly, nice corona, nice prominence over there on the left-hand side. A little longer exposure to get the full corona that was coming out. This is a single shot image at 1/10 of a second, ISO 800, showing Earthshine on the moon. So you can, in fact, capture Earthshine with a single image. You don't need to stack images and do all kinds of fancy editing. So there was Earthshine at mid totality. Again, another shot a little after mid totality, getting the prominences at the bottom, and now the prominence off to the right-hand side was starting to come into view. And diamond ring at the end of the eclipse. 2 hours after the eclipse, this is what the sky looked like there in Seymour. So I was there. Total solar eclipse in my hometown. Great fun, had a wonderful experience. The community loved it, and it was awesome. So I highly recommend if you have a total solar eclipse in your hometown, go there. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, that was some good pictures, and it's always fun to be able to relate, like you said, to your hometown and things like that. So yeah. All right. Next one up is going to be David Devea. He's not on tonight, so I'm just gonna. He's got a kind of a PDF that's got some words and some pictures. So I'm just going to kind of we'll walk through it and see what it says. So I will share his out. So David's the regional coordinator for the NASA and the National Science Foundation funded DEB, which I had to look on their banner to see what DEB was, and it's I can't read it now, something eclipse breakout. So anyway, it was a series of scopes that they had set up along the eclipse path like they did for the 2017 one. And so he was at one of the sites. And they had 80 sites along the totality, 60 sites had good weather. He was at St. Francis of Assisi Church in San Antonio, which was clouded out. the night of April 6th. He was setting up his equipment, had a group of 30 interested people. So of course, you know, you just do a star party. And we all kind of do that when we get a crowd around. We'll throw an impromptu star party. As part of the NASA Eclipse Stars program, he gave a lecture the night before the eclipse to over 100 attendees. Hope was still high for a clear eclipse day. Alas, that was not to be. The day started with high thin clouds and got thicker. But that didn't deter about 80 people who brought lawn chairs and picnic snacks to view the eclipse. Since it was cloudy, we couldn't do much science, so we got right in the middle of the group and explained what was happening. Under a very dark sky during totality, the people cheered, unlike others in Texas. Well, I think they were cheering all along the path to totality. It was a great time and the people were wonderful. While the science equipment wasn't fast enough to get data through the occasional sucker holes, Linda was quick on the draw with her Canon and managed to get the only image at DEB Site 5 during a split-second hole in the clouds during the partial phase. Hey, you take what you can get. He did apparently live stream his events, so there's his YouTube channel. So I think if you go to YouTube and just search for him, you'll find him. So that was, so David was doing it as part of one of the NASA programs. That's kind of cool. All right. Next up is Paul Lorenz. So Paul, you can go ahead and unmute and I'll start getting your slide ready.
Okay. Can you hear me?
We can, yeah.
Okay.
And I'll have it up here in just a second. All right, go ahead, Paul.
Okay, can you see the arrow on the screen here?
I can't on yours. You'll have to tell me where to point and I'll use my arrow.
Well, okay, maybe I may not need it. Okay, first of all, I wound up in Fredericksburg, Texas, which is about 20 miles from Kerrville. And apparently we didn't have maybe quite as good of luck. I came along with Martin Hale, and he had some business account where he was able to get a hotel room for free at the Fairfield Inn in Fredericksburg, Texas, which is about maybe 50 miles or so northwest of San Antonio. And well, here's the scene. This may have actually been right after totality here. But anyway, you can see the skies don't look too promising here. And this is a field just adjacent to the hotel property. And this is this brick thing here is the property line. And then that's some of my auxiliary equipment there sitting alongside of it. Okay, now next slide. Okay, well, here I am. Here's the parking lot. There's the hotel building in the background. There I am standing with my 6-inch refractor. It's a Astrotech 152 triplet, and it's equipped with a William Optics 0.8x field flattener slash reducer, and on there is a Canon EOS R so I had that set up for photography, and you can see that we're just right about, it's just right before totality. It's on a Celestron CGX mount. Next to it to the right is the instrument I use to observe it visually with, which is a Astrotech 115 triplet. And I have on there a wide field eyepiece. And right now, of course, you've got the sun filters there. In the background are some people that they were very curious and came over to have a look periodically. and even once during totality. Now, I left the camera that took these scenes with the same settings to show it getting darker. Okay, next slide. So here it is. We're getting a little closer to totality, and in the forefront here is Martin himself, and he's got a little ETX scope right there, and he's getting set up to view it just visually. And then there are my two instruments. There's a battery sitting under the visual instrument that actually powered both mounts. Next slide. Here's another scene once again. Okay, next slide again. Here it is. I must not have these quite in the same. This was actually after totality, because that was I swung that visual instrument away because it was hitting the pier by that time. Next slide. Okay, here are the actual photographs. All right, this is probably the best one I got, and you can see the naked eye prominence was on the left there. And you can see a little bit of it and even a little of the chromosphere that I got. This was taken through the 6-inch refractor. It's not anywhere near the quality that instrument is ultimately capable of. But I was lucky to get anything at all through the clouds. Periodically, there was a hole in them, and I did get to view these while viewing it in the visually in the 115, which was absolutely spectacular. That color actually doesn't. It was a bloody reddish pink. It was unlike any color I've ever seen of anything on Earth. It was just, I did in fact get to see it, but not much of the corona. Next slide. Here it is through the clouds, a little a corona scene. There's one big prominence sticking out that actually wasn't visible until further on. It wasn't visible after about maybe the first minute or so. Next slide. Here's another shot again with just the prominences. Or no, actually that was that big one. I oriented I had the camera oriented sideways there on that. Next slide. Here's something, the clouds kind of got it revealed half the image. I thought this was kind of an interesting effect. And I took that, so I thought I'd include that as well. But anyway, I did get to see the eclipse to a certain extent, as you saw here, not the way I had hoped. And I'm kind of bummed by the fact that I'm never going to get to photograph a total solar eclipse with my 6-inch refractor, which I was really hoping to do and really get ultra high resolution images of the solar prominences. But this is what I was able to get. And still, we all had a good, Martin and I had a good time, and the people there, the public who were parked next to us, had a good time. There was a family having a family outing. Boy, I never got to have a family outing like that while I was growing up. Okay, well, I think that's about it. I think that's the last one.
Yeah, that's it. Well, very nice. That's great. Great photos. Paul, do you have anything else you want to say to wrap up?
Well, I'm seriously considering going to the eclipse in Australia in July of 2028. And it will have a maximum eclipse will be a little over 5 minutes. And the weather prospects there are much better, especially as you go toward the northwest part of the country, which is where I ultimately, if I do go, that's where I'm going to want to go. And you probably will have almost 100% guarantee that it'll be clear. according to climatological data.
Yeah, you can't go wrong going to Australia.
Yep. And it's a politically safe place. You know, I want nothing to do with the Middle East. I'm mad as hell at that part of the country, and I would never want to visit a part of the world I'm mad at. It's not, it wouldn't be worth the money.
Yeah.
So
All right.
forget the one in Egypt in 27, even though it gets 6 minutes, 23 seconds maximum.
Yeah, there's some long ones coming up. All right. Well, thanks, Paul. That was excellent.
Well, you're quite welcome.
And if you want to go ahead and mute yourself, and Larry, you can unmute, and we'll do yours next.
Okay, how's the audio? Can you hear me?
Yeah, good, loud and clear.
Okay, my son Dave and I drove to Texas for the solar eclipse next. And because of the weather prospects, we look for locations in Southwest Texas next. But our experience with the 2017 eclipse showed the value of being able to relocate based on last minute weather forecasts. So we booked a room in Ozona there, you can see on the upper left. And we initially made reservations at a ranch just north of Uvalde. But next, unfortunately, last minute weather forecast showed heavy clouds in Southwest Texas, but 4 of the 5 models on windy.com showed a hole in the clouds opening up just before eclipse time in an area west of Waco. So we decided to head to Evant, a small town in the center of that predicted hole. So how did that actually work out? Well, you see on the next slide. So this is a image showing the actual cloud cover at the start of the eclipse, and I've sketched in the eclipse path. The image was taken by the Earth Polychromatic Imaging Camera on the Discover spacecraft, which is at the L1 Lagrange point, 1.6 million kilometers from Earth toward the sun. And you can see the actual shadow of the moon there on the Earth. So this was during the eclipse. So next. The red dot shows the location of Evant, Texas, and you can see the opening in the clouds that was predicted by the weather model. So we lucked out. Next. We got up early on the eclipse day on Monday and drove 220 miles to Evant. And there we were pleased to find an observing area set up in their central square with porta potties and a portable barbecue setup where we got a great Texas breakfast. But notice how thick the clouds were when this was taken about 9 o'clock in the morning. Next. Around 10 o'clock, the clouds began to thin out. So we set up our equipment, including a 4-inch Renaissance refractor and a C-Star S50. By 11 o'clock, only a few thin clouds remained overhead, and by eclipse time, there were several hundred people at the site. The barbecue completely sold out before second contact. Next. First contact was at 12:19. I took partial phase images with the 4-inch refractor and a Nikon camera every 10 minutes. The timing was favorable. The sun crossed the meridian just 5 minutes before second contact, so I was able to image through totality without having to do a meridian flip. Next. I set up the C-Star to take a time lapse. Next. It took an image every 10 seconds. I set the shutter speed to manual, 1 millisecond duration to get a consistent exposure. The C-Star tracked pretty well until near the end of the partial phases where it couldn't quite track the thin crescent. Next, just before totality, I slewed the 4-inch telescope away from the sun, removed the filter, and slewed back. Next. During totality, I shot a wide range of exposures. including short exposures to capture the prominences. Next. And longer exposures to capture the coma. Next. And with the range of exposures, you can create a high dynamic range image that shows the prominences as well as the corona, the coma, I should say, and looks very much like it does to the naked eye during the eclipse. Okay, next. At third contact, I also captured images of the diamond ring effect. Okay, next. And then after third contact, I restarted the C-star time lapse and did a quick meridian flip on the 4-inch refractor and replaced the solar filter and started taking more partial eclipse images. But then a thick bank of clouds rolled in. Next. And that was the end of the eclipse as far as we were concerned. So we were very lucky to just have clear skies during the time we needed, and just barely made it through totality before the clouds rolled in.
Well, that's good. It's kind of nice that the weather predictions actually worked for a change, huh? Anything else you want to share, Larry?
That's pretty much it.
All right. Thank you very much. That was awesome. All right, Eric, we're going to go to you next, and we're going to have a couple after you, but you can do your eclipse stuff first, and then you can also go ahead and do the planet report, and then we'll get into a couple more eclipse folks. So you should be able to unmute, Eric.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Good. So as we bring up the first slide, I went with a small group of friends to Mazatlan in Mexico, and yeah, you can see the I think that's the video, right? So you can run that. Yeah, that starts at second contact. And so you can see it, so it's getting dark. I take off the solar filter, and the cloud in the background announces totality.
Now look, you don't have to look at that. You don't need the glasses.
And you can see to the left, there's still light from outside the totality area in the sky. Of course, we're looking to the southeast, and the shadow came from the west. So that's around mid-totality when it was darkest. And then soon we'll switch to the end. Now you can see the light comes from the right side, and it's only seconds till the third contact. People announcing the sun coming back. And just 2 seconds later, you can see the shadows coming back. So a little sunlight is really enough. Can you show now the slides, please? Can you start with the first slide, number 1?
That's the order you had them in, so that's the order I put them in. Which one do you want to see first?
This the slide number 1. Well, I can just say that I brought my 33 centimeter Dobsonian because at the 2017 eclipse I had that, and it was so much better than all the totalities I saw before, because the big telescope just shows more detail and brighter. And I wasn't disappointed because at this eclipse there were even better prominences. It was great use with the telescope. And I doubt that any image can show those prominences as well as you can see in a telescope, because deep red is a really dark color, and if you want to show it in image, it's dark. But those prominences are so extremely bright it's just not possible to show it in the image. But what I also like in Mazatlan was looking at the sunsets over the ocean, and you can see that there are many layers that cause the sun wind to be everything else than round. And as the sun sets, maybe go to the next image. You can see that the top part, it's getting green because only the green refracted light makes it through there. The red is already a little lower. That's similar to the green flash when the sun is lower. And then the next image shows a minute later or so, then when part of the sun separated to different layers. And I think I have one more image here. It's again a different layer further down where part of the sun separated. That was very interesting to watch from the 19th floor right next to the beach in an apartment building in real estate for 4 nights. And then I also have the planet report for May. And so it's very quick for the evening. There's just no planet. But in the morning, there are several. And the first one is rising at 3 a.m. Saturn. And its rings are now open only 3 degrees. So that's 10 times less than the largest possible opening. They're pretty thin. That will be interesting to watch in the telescope for the next month. In 2 months, it's only 2 degrees ring opening. And then a little later, Mars rises. It's almost same brightness as Saturn. And by 4:30, Mercury rises. It can be seen in 4:45 or so. But soon afterwards, it's too bright to see. So Mercury is really very difficult to see. But those 3 planets are in the morning sky in a row. And the next 2 nights, or mornings, actually, the moon will be within that group of planets. And even on May 6th, the moon will be very close to Mercury, but already quite low and quite thin. The biggest event in May is the most interesting one is maybe that the moon occults Sagittarius or Beta Virginis. That's one of relatively bright stars that has a name. Only occurs maybe a handful of times during the year, so it's a special event this month. And it's in the late evening. It will be occulted 10:48 till 11:06. And the start of the occultation is rather interesting because there the moon occults in its dark side, the star, and it suddenly blinks out. And if you watch it in a telescope, a third magnitude star is really bright, and it's impressive when it suddenly drops out. When it comes back at 11:06, it will be in a bright limb, so that will be less interesting, but it still is observable. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Let me just make sure that check something here. I think this is the slide you wanted to show. Let me get back to Zoom here.
In Mazatlan, the skies were pretty good. There were some thin clouds, but also clear spots. We didn't lose any second to any cloud, but it wasn't 100% perfect. I like the view from space that Larry showed because it really showed the Earth during the eclipse, how intense the shadow of the moon is. But Jim, if you cannot find that image, it's not a problem. Yeah, you have it. So it shows our setup, Mitoxonian, and then to the left, there's an H alpha telescope. That was interesting to get the prominences on the disk and off the disk already before locality. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. That was awesome. Yeah, I'm glad you got some good views and worked well. All right, I'm gonna stop this share. Next up is Ross Carnes. You don't have any slides, but if you want to just kind of talk about where you went and what your experience is.
Yes, I had watched Michael's presentation on the weather. And so I was sort of undetermined whether I was even going to go to the eclipse or not. But then when he showed the part where during years of El Nino, there was a clear spot in South Missouri, I decided I'm going to go. So I went again using some of Susan's advice because I have a whole lot of nephews and nieces in Missouri. So I decided that even if I do get wiped out, I'll at least be able to say I visited them. So anyway, I proceeded to a location that was a few miles west of Doniphan, Missouri, which was on the path of totality. I got there and was expecting to have a public access road to a cemetery. And it turned out the cemetery didn't exist anymore. The road wasn't public, but the lady that owned the land said, okay, go ahead. So I went up there. My sister-in-law and I basically set our lawn chairs out. We had no intention really of doing any picture taking. We wanted it all to be negative, just our eyes. And the results were just absolutely astounding. For one thing, the sky was totally clear the entire time. We watched the eclipse from beginning to end. I saw the corona when the moon was totally over the thing, and that was all expected. But being a total amateur and a beginner at this, I saw a really bright spot on the right side of the eclipse and assumed it was the beginning of Bailey's beads. But it turns out that it didn't clear as fast as I thought it would for Bailey's beads. Once I came back to home base and saw some of your other members' pictures, I realized what I was looking at was a prominence. And I was looking at that with the naked eye. And rather than see the sharp point that you saw, it was almost like someone took the star Sirius and just plugged it onto the side of the shadow of the moon, because it was quite bright. And it wasn't like the diamond ring. And for me, it was absolutely the highlight of the event. Now, we were all alone, my sister-in-law and I, on this ranch. And one of the things that she said I'd be sure to mention was that as the sky went dark, the animals started reacting as if it were dusk. The birds were fluttering and carrying on. And then 4.5 minutes later, they were waking up. They had a very short night, but the animals really acted as if it was night. So we really enjoyed that part of the event as well. So I watched from the very beginning, first contact, to the very end, last contact. And it was just a once in a lifetime experience for me. I'll never see another one like it. And it was very much enjoyable. As I say, I did not expect to do a presentation, but Jim convinced me that I should at least talk about it. So that's what I have. And that's my experience. And it was a great one.
Well, that's awesome, Ross. And yeah, I mean, I didn't take any pictures either, except for the drones. So you certainly, a lot of times it's nice just to use your eyeballs and watch it. And then you can check out some of the pictures later on. And we've gotten some awesome pictures, and I'm sure there's a lot more within the club that we haven't seen yet from it. And hopefully we'll get a chance to see those down the road. All right, thanks, Ross. Brad Schaefer, you're up next. I'll show your image.
There we go. Hey, so are you, well, it doesn't matter. So the element helium was discovered in 1869 when astronomers went off and used visual spectroscopy looking at the sun at the time of contact, first and start and end of the eclipse. And they saw a yellow line that no one knew what it could be. And so Norman Lockyer went off and, after a lot of work with chemists, deduced that it had to be a new element. And he gave the name of the element after the sun, Helios. He gave the name helium. And well, of course, we know it's our sun is 1/4 helium. Okay, so this was the discovery of the helium. And it can only be seen, only is not the right word, but it can mainly be seen just for a couple seconds around the time of the start and the end of a total solar eclipse. It appears as a yellow line, a spectral line. Okay, so this is the flash spectrum, where the moon is an occulter and is hiding the photosphere of the sun, and only the chromosphere above the top of the photosphere is visible. And so the light from the chromosphere is not being ground out by the much brighter light from the photosphere. Okay, so for a long time, the only way you could go getting information about, well, this part of the atmosphere of the sun was total solar eclipses. And this is part of what fueled many solar eclipse expeditions. Even back up into the time when we were kids and would be reading Sky and Telescope, after every total solar eclipse, there would be pictures of the flash spectrum. Okay, well, since the time when we were kids, there have been much fewer in the way of articles or reports about the flash spectrum because the scientific importance has gone down now. Okay, well, anyway, so that brings us up to the current time. And at this point, what I'm seeing on my monitor is, Jim, your face. You're scratching your head just then. I'm hoping that people can get to see my picture, because I will put on my fun inspiration for how I would go off and see the flash spectrum visually. And Jim, can you check to make sure, just to make sure that I can people can actually see what I'm wearing?
They should be able to see that, and they should be seeing your picture as well.
Perfect. Okay. Well, anyway, so about a year or two ago, I realized that one can go putting on these diffraction gratings. I have them scotch taped to my glasses. This is high-tech stuff here. These are diffraction gratings you can get from Edmund. I think they're about 30 cents a pair. There's just a little slide. Now you can see the scotch tape there. Fair enough. And you can put them, and when you look up in the sky, you can see, well, everything around you, you can start seeing spectral lines. There's always a zeroth order, so you see everything straight through. And then off to one side, you see the spectrum. It actually has pretty good dispersion to it. And these are great for going to 4th of July fireworks displays, because you see the sky is just filled with rainbows. And I've been using these to go looking, for example, for the Perseids from the lip of the Grand Canyon, looking for a meteor spectra. Okay, fine. And the realization came a little while ago that, wow, this would be a perfect way to go off and see the flash spectrum. And this would be seeing with my eye the flash spectrum. Now, I'm sure there are people out there, but I haven't heard of anyone since the 1800s who's ever actually seen the flash spectrum with their eye. So anyway, I'm sure there are people out there, but at least it's a fun idea here. So I went off and looked for the flash spectrum. Martha and I went off to Ingram, Texas. We were we had camping at the Stonehenge site there. And the day before, we had been following the clear dark sky, and we saw the writing on the wall that the area around Ingram and Fredericksburg was going to be likely cloudy. And so we started running north the day before. And for what it's worth, I actually have been for a long time following the clear dark sky chart for the areas around there, and been then comparing the predictions from the clear dark sky chart versus what actually happens as determined by weather satellites 1 day and 2 days later. And what I found was that the clear dark sky charts always were very reliable, because they're actually pointing to things that they're doing calculation for cloudiness, which is what we care about. Whereas the weather reports you hear around were all mutually contradictory, and they were reporting things like probability of rain and things like that, which is completely useless to us. So the clear dark sky chart for things in the North America worked wonderfully. Anyway, so we fled north and we set up in a golf course, fair enough. And just like everyone else in southern Texas, we had the troubles and the horrors that, oh, holy cow, it's only cloudy, cloudy, cloudy. And it was basically completely clouded up until about 4 minutes before the time of totality. And then it just magically cleared. Holy cow. And we had a largely clear sky. You can see in this photo here that there were still thin clouds hanging around, but this sort of thin clouds really doesn't affect the viewing very much. So there we go. So we got incredibly lucky. We had a nice, good, clear total solar eclipse. And so with my Eclipse goggles here, a different type, what happened is immediately before totality started, I took off everything else, put these goggles on, and started looking at the sun. Well, I wasn't actually looking at the sun. I was looking 30 degrees to the left of the sun, because that's where the spectrum appears. So I was looking at the sun's spectrum while over the time of contacts, and lo and behold, you actually you could easily see the flash spectrum. And it was awesome. It looked beautiful, nice color. With the eye, what I saw was the bright red line, that's H alpha. And actually with my eye and these diffraction gratings, I could see well past the H alpha line, much further into the red. My impression had been that human eyes can't see much out past H alpha, but there I was seeing it. Okay, we could also see the blue H beta line and the yellow helium line was quite prominent. It was bright yellow. It was probably brighter than the H alpha line. It's hard to judge those sorts of things because it's mixed up with the eye sensitivity. There was also the green magnesium line that I could see through my eyes. And actually, I'm not sure why that magnesium line should be so prominent, but there it is. That's why you go off and take the real spectrum and analyze them. Okay, so I am, let's call it one of the few people living who has ever actually seen the flash spectrum with their own eyes. But I also had a realization that, gee, if I can do this, I can, well, take the picture like what I am showing on the screen now. So it's utterly trivial. All you do is you take your cell phone and you, well, Scotch tape the diffraction grating, this 30-cent diffraction grating, you Scotch tape it over the lens, and you actually get pretty good spectra. And so here is my spectra of the flash spectrum taken with my iPhone in the movie mode, where I had just placed it down flat on the ground. Well, it wasn't on the ground, it was flat on a surface, and just let it go. So no time during totality was used. So yeah, I started at 10 minutes before totality and finished at 10 minutes after totality. So no time in totality was used in getting this spectrum. And here from the spectrum, you can go off and see fairly easily the H alpha line, the blue H beta line, the green magnesium line, and the historical yellow helium line. It's the helium-1 line. And we were incredibly wowed. And let's see, it was about half an hour after the totality, the eclipse effect on the clouds gave out, and the clouds returned to being all cloudy then. So we had a wonderful time, just a short amount of time. Undoubtedly, it was the eclipse effect making the clouds dissipate, but we saw it. And we are all pumped. And we've already, about a year ago, we put down money for going to the Total Solar Eclipse in Egypt. It's guaranteed clear skies, and I think I'm going to try observing the total solar eclipse at 6 minutes plus. I'm going to go observing that from the top of the steps to King Tut's tomb, and from the tops of the steps of the tomb in the Valley of the Kings, King Tut's mummy is about 30 feet down that direction, and Egypt will be awesome. Martha and I went there last February, and we had the full 3-week Nile cruise, and it worked very well. And so we're going back to Egypt again, coming up on August 8th, 2027.
That's interesting, Brad, to look at it from a whole different perspective. And that picture turned out pretty good.
Yeah, I will admit that my picture is nowhere near as great as many of the photos I've already seen coming up in here. But this is unique and classy. Actually, Jim, your picture, I've never seen anything like that, which the drone shot of the ground, that was a good idea. But this also is another one, another picture that was utterly easy to make, just your cell phone and on movie mode and a Scotch tape of a diffraction grating, and you can see the flash spectrum.
Very cool. Well, thanks, Brad. All right, and then Joe Rabinowitz, relatively new member, you're up next. So if you want to unmute, and I will get your presentation ready.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Great. So yeah, I joined the association about a month and a half, 2 months ago. So I live in Philadelphia, but I get to go out to Tucson fairly often, and I think it's been a lot of fun going out there. So like many of you, my wife and I and some friends, we went to Texas. And when we were in Texas, we were halfway between Lampasas and Burnett at a ranch called the Two Naughty Chicken Ranch. There were about 150 people there. And we also had mostly cloudy skies. And then for periods, it was just cloudy, and then every once in a while it cleared up. But I mean, so it wasn't overcast, which was nice. Do you have the movie first? So this first movie is the partial, and this kind of just shows, this is with an oxygen 3 filter on top of, and a solar filter. I don't know if it's going to run. And it's just showing the cloud cover as the clouds move from right to left and then from the bottom to the top. So there must have been different cloud layers going across the sky, and that's what we're using, was these 2 different cloud layers.
Pretty cool.
Now that I'm seeing all this equipment,
So if you want, you can go to the next slide. The next slide is the start of. So this is the diamond ring effect at the beginning of the eclipse. And for us, it started at 12:34 and 20 seconds, and that's the time of this image. And what you can see is, you can see around like 11 o'clock, you can see some of the prominences at around 11 o'clock, and then maybe a tiny bit around 1:30. But as the moon goes from, again, right to left over the surface of the sun, the ones on the right side of the image will start to become more prominent, and the ones on the left side less prominent. The next image is about 3 seconds later, and you can definitely see the prominences around 11 o'clock and again around 7:30 down at the bottom. and not so much on the other side of the sun. But the next slide is about a minute and a half later, and you can start to see the little prominences being visible around 1:30 and around 4 o'clock, let's say, on the clock face. And a little bit is left around 11:30 and at maybe 8 o'clock. So here you can see 4 different prominences on the sun. And the next couple of slides will show the sun or the moon's moving again to the left, and you can see the larger prominences on the right side of the sun becoming more visible. The last slide that I have again shows kind of the beginning of the diamond ring effect, and this was at 12:38 and 46 seconds. So the eclipse for us lasted 4 minutes and 26 seconds, which was great. It was really great. I mean, there were a lot of clouds, and if you go to the next movie, which is what I did in this movie is I started with a really low ISO, and then I increased the ISO as the movie went on so you could see the corona. So at the beginning, if you start it, you can kind of see clouds going across, but those clicks are changing the ISO.
Look good in the camera. Like, it just looks a lot better with the naked eye. Are you getting a good image on this?
Yeah.
The sea star is kind of just cropped out, I think, because it's maybe there's a special eclipse
Those are
setting.
some
I don't know.
friends we were
Yeah,
with.
I'm not getting that at all.
So now you can see the
yeah,
corona coming out and
do
kind of the
this.
prominence is kind of not being visible anymore because of the brightness of the corona as the ISO goes up. Yeah, and it was a really nice time. And at the end of during the eclipse, people were cheering, and it was really nice. It was nice to hear a bunch of people being happy about something like this, considering how in human history it hasn't always been that way. Anyway, so that was my experience.
That's great. Thanks, Joe. All right, so that wraps everything up. So I'm going to turn it back over to Michael Bakich for bring us back home. Or actually into the future.
Yeah, home is not where we want to be. Okay, so let me share my screen again. This one, I guess. Share. And PowerPoint. Okay, so now I want to talk about upcoming solar eclipses, just the next 3. Okay, I'm going to do this quickly because these have been wonderful presentations. Thank you very much. I really loved reliving the eclipse through each one of your talks. Okay, so the first one is in the Atlantic, mainly in Spain. Okay, and here's the path of the eclipse. Let's take a look at the climate prospects. Okay, you can see it up here. Terrible, 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 awful, bad, miserable. What? And then we get to Spain, and it's all this blue. Okay, so it looks like in 2026, Spain might be a really good place and also a wonderful destination to see other things for this eclipse. But let's take a closer look. Okay, here we are, and let me see if I can move this bar away. Oh yeah, okay. So in the northern part of Spain, totality lasts 1 minute 48 seconds, but the sun is it's slightly less than 10 degrees above the horizon. As we move to the center part of Spain, 1 minute 44 seconds, and now we're 7 degrees up. And then probably the best weather prospects on the shore of the Balearic Sea, 1 minute 39 seconds, which is definitely worth traveling for, but the sun is only 4 degrees above the horizon at mid-eclipse. So while Spain offers really good climate prospects, the altitude of the sun at mid-eclipse is fairly low. So I suggest if you're going to Spain, go on a tour, because they will have scoped out the area and you won't have any hills or anything in the way. And, that would probably be the best way to see it. Plus, you can see the museums and architecture in Madrid and Toledo and Valencia and many other areas there. And the food is wonderful. Okay, the Great Australian Solar Eclipse is what I'm calling it. In the northwest part of Australia, totality lasts 5 minutes, 4 seconds. And even in Sydney, a wonderful city, Holly and I were there in 2012 for the eclipse. We didn't see it from Sydney, but that's where we flew into. Even in Sydney, it's 3 minutes, 44 seconds. Take a closer look related to climate. Sorry, the slide is a little fuzzy, but you can see all this stuff down here and very little up to the northwest. So Sydney is not the place to be. Okay, in July, it's really quite cloudy there, and also the Blue Mountains west of Sydney. But as you move toward the northwest, the chances of clear weather improve. The only problem there is that the largest town in that entire area has only 2,000 people living in it. So, it's going to be fairly primitive. And west are few roads and towns, but it is also the dry season. So you're likely to see totality, but your view is more likely to be obscured by flies than by clouds. So again, go on a tour is my suggestion if you're going to go to Australia in 2028. And then the eclipse between the two is the one that Holly and I are pointing toward, and this is 2nd of August, 2027. And you can see that that totality starts in the mid-Atlantic. It goes over the Strait of Gibraltar and has more than 4 minutes of totality there. So that would be a wonderful place to view the eclipse. And then over Africa. And we're concentrating on Egypt because that's where the maximum amount of totality is. And we're looking at a site just north of Luxor, which would have 6 minutes, 23 seconds of totality. This will be the total solar eclipse of our lives because nobody now alive will be able to see more than 6 minutes, 23 seconds of totality. This is the longest one for anybody who's alive right now. So we're planning to be at Luxor. The only other place that I could say that we've been to, and I've been to 15 total solar eclipses, was Easter Island, where at mid-eclipse we could see 5 of the statues, the wonderful Moai on the horizon, and 40 degrees up in the sky was the totally eclipsed sun. Well, how about standing in front of the Temple of Karnak and looking almost directly overhead, 82 degrees high, to see 6 minutes plus of totality. It is going to be something to behold. Dust storms are possible, but they mainly occur in spring in Egypt. And it's variable, so it is possible. Morocco, Gibraltar, Spain, Tunisia have much lower dust at eclipse time. And then my last slide shows some climate statistics. So in Egypt, the mean daily maximum temperature is about 95 degrees. The average precipitation for the month of August is none. Average humidity, because you're near the Nile, 61%. Possible sunshine, 86%. Wait a minute, though. We have 2 sets of figures here. That's right, because I've compared Luxor in August to Tucson. Tucson is actually 4 degrees warmer in August than it is in Luxor, Egypt. We get 2 inches of rain in August. They get 0. And you can see the other the humidity and the percent of possible sunshine fairly close, although Egypt does get more possible sunshine. So we are planning to see the eclipse in Egypt. I'm not too worried about the political situation there because they want our money badly, and they are promoting this eclipse even now big time. So that's all I'll say about the next 3 eclipses, Australia and Spain, I would consider going on a tour. I'd also consider going on a tour of Egypt, especially if you haven't been there, because you can see all those other fabulous sites. But it is possible to fly into Cairo and get to Luxor fairly easily if you wanted to do it on your own. That, as they say, is that. Remember my 4 words, it's all about totality. Thanks very much.
All right, thanks, Michael. That was a good recap and showing what's coming up in the near future. So that's great. All right, I have enabled everybody to be able to unmute, and I'm going to turn it back over to May. And if you want to stop screen sharing, Michael.
Yeah, let me see how to do that. Just a second here.
I used to be able to do that, but let's see. Oh, there I can. I can do it for you.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Almost had it.
And I think I am unmuted. Let me know if you can't hear. Okay,
Yeah,
you
we
can.
got you.
Okay, good. Well, thank you, everyone. I mean, this was a total treat to have all these wonderful experiences and information out there. It just sort of lets you know what a club like this is about and what it fosters and what we can all do. So thank you so much. We now have an announcement from Pete Hermes. I think, Pete, you might have the voting results.
Yes,
May,
I do, May, and I just want to thank all the members that voted. We tallied approximately 191 votes through the online system over this week, and we'll continue to use this. But none of the races were contested, so I certainly appreciate, and I think a lot of us appreciate the fact that the members showed support for those folks that were standing for these offices. But Bob Reynolds was elected, and these are all 2-year terms. All reelected, was reelected to the position of secretary. John Callis and David Rossiter to the board of directors as members at large. And then also John Christensen and David Pass to the Nomination and Volunteer Resource Committee. So thank you to all those that voted, and we'll look forward to your support in the future. Thank you.
Wonderful, Pete. Thank you for all the work that you and your committee do to keep us organized and keep the elections working well and functional and being very fairly conducted. So we appreciate you very much.
You're welcome.
And now I just wanted to check to see if we have new members that are present.
Hey, May, before we do that, why don't we go ahead and say goodbye to social media?
Okay, yes, that's a good idea. Okay, so thank you for the people who are on Facebook that are with us tonight. We appreciate your coming. We will be normally online for our monthly meetings the first Friday at 6:30 of every month. We have our summer schedule. This year has changed a little bit, and so that we will have a little change in I think our June meeting as well. And that will not be the first Friday. I think that one will be the second Friday. But other than that, after that we should get back on schedule for our regular Friday meetings. So the first Friday of every month at 6:30. So we will hope that people on social media will join us then as well.